Developer Dontnod has established itself as a narrative-driven studio. After finding success in the Life is Strange series, the team has since expanded their creativity to other genres, as seen in the cliff-scaling adventure of 2023, Jusant. However, while Jusant delivered a story without relying on text, their newest game, Banishers: A Ghost of New Eden, forces the developer into uncharted territory with the implementation of combat and investigative systems. However, at the core of this entire experience is a truly memorable adventure that blends fantasy and romance like I've never seen before.
The longer path is safer. You must take it.
Why won't you come with us then?
The quickest you'll go ahead. We'll wait with food and shelter ready, then we'll all travel on together.
Banishers: Ghost of New Eden is set in New Eden in 1695, as Banishers Red and Antea arrive at the request of their friend Charles. As a Banisher, these two travel to various towns to get rid of spiritual unrest. Ghosts and other spirits linger around, causing the living to suffer as a result. That said, the case in New England is unlike anything the two have ever confronted, and they underestimate the power of this spirit, which leads to the untimely death of Antea. While Red ended up surviving the encounter, he makes it his goal to travel back to New Eden to banish the ghost who killed Antea. However, dying in this world has other meanings, as Antea finds herself becoming the ghostly figure she once fought against. The question emerges of, what would you do for the one you love? The game sets up just how serious Antea is about her job in the opening moments, but it also shows you how hard some choices weigh on her. This makes the oath the two come to in their current circumstances so impactful. Players have a choice to do the job of the Banisher and ascend or banish spirits, or sacrifice the living for a chance to revive Antea. While the choice is made, players still have the option to change their decision when it comes up. Without spoiling the best parts of this game, I will say that developer Dontnod has really created a wonderful cinema-esque experience within this adventure. Rarely do the characters move on from the events before reflecting on the emotional damage that stems from their actions. I was very impressed with the way my choices affected specific scenes, and while I first wanted to do anything to bring Antea back, the investigations encountered throughout the adventure make it difficult to consistently sacrifice those who may not deserve it for the sake of my own needs. During gameplay, players will travel towards the goal of New Eden, but along the way they will find towns and people in need of a Banisher's ability. As you interact with residents, you'll collect clues that lead to spirits in need of investigation. The game flow requires exploration, summoning and questioning spirits, examining scenes, collecting information, and then bringing everyone together for sentencing. It's here that you choose whether to blame, banish, or ascend. Blaming will sacrifice a living person, while banish and ascend are there for spirits and are basically a good or bad ending for them, depending on their crime if one was committed. The choices are never easy though, but there are a lot of chances, so you aren't technically required to stick by the oath each time you encounter a choice. Still, you aren't told how many lives you will need to sacrifice to bring Antea back, so it's always a topic of conversation. I will say that some of these choices are very hard to make because I know what must be done, but I also want to save this character. Sadly, the game did a pretty bad job of establishing these two characters as lovers in the opening, showing them mostly working separately. However, their relationship becomes more clear throughout the journey, which makes future choices pretty impactful. Still, I would have hoped their love was a bit stronger from the outset because it would have made the early struggle heavier on the player experience. The other aspects of the game is combat, which is okay. I didn't think combat would be the strong suit of a Dontnod game, but they've crafted a decent system here. During battle, Red is meant to attack the spirits, while you can switch to Antea to fight against possessed creatures. The switching requires some spirit energy, but I never felt like I didn't have access to Antea when I needed her. As you progress, you'll be able to upgrade equipment and abilities, which also comes with some choices, as unlocking one ability will lock you out of another, but you can switch them as you see fit. Material for upgrading is found throughout the world, making it necessary to explore the environments, but before I get too far ahead of myself, let's stick with combat. As you come into contact with enemies, attacks can be combined as you switch characters and utilize their various abilities that are on cooldowns. I should say though that the biggest challenge that I encountered was hitting an enemy that I wasn't locked onto. Sometimes there's groups of enemies and Red will just start swinging in the wind behind him when there's wolves right there in front of him. Locking on will actually help a lot, but not so much when you have multiple enemies surrounding you, so I had to kind of choose when to use the lock-on feature and when not to. Other actions include block and parry systems required for stronger enemies, but a gun is unlocked that can be used to damage and access hidden items later on. As you explore, you're constantly in a state of strafing, which does take some getting used to. While this works in the open world, it makes exploring closed areas a little chaotic. However, it didn't take long for me to get the hang of navigating the game's enormous environments. Yeah, there's a lot to get lost in here. The game's map takes on a sort of Metroidvania-like design with branching paths and abilities required for access to other areas. It's also a little overwhelming at times because the map isn't the most straightforward, and the on-screen compass isn't too helpful for finding side quest landmarks. Still, I did like how fast the characters are on the overworld map. Banishers, Ghosts of New Eden becomes a sum of many parts. It attempts to bridge the gap between action and emotionally charged narrative storytelling, but for the most part, the writing takes the award for the strongest aspects of the experience. It elevates this experience from an action game you've played before to a media with depth. While there's room for both, the combat just never sticks. I can see this becoming a stronger aspects of the studio if they stick with it, but in its current design, the challenge and the pacing are mostly weighed down by the fights. That said, without the combat and exploration, the experience also needs to give a break from the heavy dialogue and depressing setting, so in the same breath, the developers were right to blend these systems together, but more work is required to make each aspect seamless. Further, I just want to point out a strange delay from opening up the map or menu, as this delay becomes more noticeable later on in the game when you have to use the map more often. I also wish that there were additional markers you can lay down to remind you of points of interest. Banishers Ghost of New Eden is a surprising adventure from Dontnod that genuinely capitalizes on the theme of love and duty. The choices made in the game aim to force the player to live with their choices in the hope that they will have the things that they desire the most. It's this knack for narrative delivery that will keep players invested, but this is at the expense of a subpar combat system, although necessary, that doesn't evolve enough to stay as prominent as the goals of the narrative. I'm eager to learn what endings players come to, as I really struggled navigating the emotional impact of my many choices. Noisy Pixel is giving Banishers Ghost of New Eden a 7.5 out of 10. Thanks for watching. This video is brought to you by our supporters on Patreon. Noisy Pixel is run by a group of gamers providing independent gaming coverage through news, reviews, previews, and more. Check out our Patreon to help support our continued growth, and subscribe to keep up with all our future content.
Noisy Pixel.